We get to jump into the gospel again tonight, and we are on Sunday, November 19th, 1882. Wow, so it's 101 years before I started college. There it is. All right, and the master is right now arriving at Surendra's house. It's the chapter called The Master with the Brahmo Devotees. And if you don't know the Brahmo Samaj, I'll give you my version of it, which I don't know if it would stand up in an academic situation or not. From my understanding of the Brahmo Samaj, it seems like it was a churchification of traditional Hinduism, that God was only formless. They met, on Sundays, and it was sort of a reform movement. They were trying to get rid of caste and some of the inequities and things like that. And the master was very good friends with Keshav Sen, who was the leader of the Brahmo Samaj in Calcutta, at least. All right, and now he's going over to Surendra's house. Sri Ramakrishna arrived at Surendra's house. Sorry, I had to look at Mother there for a second. I jumped in without thinking of her. Sri Ramakrishna arrived at Surendra's house. Many devotees had assembled there, including Surendra's elder brother, who was a judge. The master to Surendra's brother: "You're a judge. That's very good. But remember, everything happens through God's power. It is He who has given you your high position. That is how you become a judge. People think it is they who are great. The water from the roof flows through a spout that is shaped like a lion's head. It looks as if the lion were bringing the water through its mouth. But look at the source of the water. A cloud gathers in the sky and rain falls on the roof, and then the water flows through the pipe and at last comes out through the spout." That's a nice way of thinking, of understanding how God works through us. The source of all the things that have come together to make us who we are, all originated in the divine, even though each one of them has a story on its way to us. And then we ourselves at the last minute take all of the credit for things that happen, for what we've made of ourselves, when it's dependent on so much. This is why discernment is so important, because these teachings, they don't seem real. When you're hearing them for the first time, you're like, oh, come on. What do you mean God does everything? There's that great Simpsons episode. I think it's a Thanksgiving episode where Bart Simpson is asked to say the grace before the dinner. And Bart Simpson's like, "Well, thanks a lot for all the food, God, that we went to work for and got our paycheck. And then Mom went to the grocery store and bought and brought here, and that she had to cook and I had to put on the table. Wait a minute. What am I thanking you for?" And this is how it seems, because ego works this way. Maya is the story that your mind concocts to link one moment to the next, and to also explain to you why you're separate and apart from the whole and why you're in charge. And the interesting thing about it is, if you start paying attention to the way your life runs, you can see that story. You can start to see the fallacy of that story. Because my favorite example is when I was in high school and had a group of friends, and we decided that on Friday night we were all going to get together and go to Caro's for dinner. And it was one group of people that had decided we were all going to do this. And when Friday night actually came, we ended up being at the movies, and I ended up being there with like a set of completely different people. But I still believed that I had planned my weekend, because as things change, your mind changes the story to keep you in charge. As the plans change, you never say, "Oh gosh, look, my plans didn't work and I wasn't responsible. I just guess we have to see what happens." It never says that. It just keeps changing the story to match the circumstance. And that's how we keep this idea alive in our mind, that we're in charge and that we're running our life. It comes down to all of the ideas of privilege that's discussed quite often around race these days also. It might be that you got into Harvard, but you were also born into a family that somebody else went to Harvard or had enough money for you to study You didn't have to work to support the family, or, any number of things. And so it's quite easy to take responsibility for these things. I think that, even Elon Musk one time on Twitter boasted about being a self-made man. And somebody wrote this whole paragraph about him. It was like, your father owned an emerald mine in South Africa. He was a multimillionaire. You're not, you're not a self-made man. So there's this idea behind everything, that it's really by the divine will that anything happens. And it's through attention, through paying attention, through becoming aware of how our mind works and how the world works around us. It's through that we come to know God, not through creating an imaginary friend and believing in him and walking with him, but by paying very close attention to the nature of the creation, to the nature of the world around us. And it's actually by paying attention to those things that you start to see the cracks in your own story. And you start to understand the truth of what the scriptures say when they say radical things like, you're not the doer. What do you mean I'm not the doer? Or that you can throw a mountain in the water. All of these things, So here's Ramakrishna using a water spout, a gargoyle, to tell the same story, that water begins, in the hands of God. Surendra's brother. The Brahmo Samaj preaches the freedom of women and the abolition of the caste system. What do you think about these matters? Master. Oh, men feel that way when they are just beginning to develop spiritual yearning. A storm raises clouds of dust, and one cannot distinguish between the different trees, the mango, the hog plum, or the tamarind. But after the storm blows over, one sees clearly. After the first storm of divine passion is quelled, one gradually understands that God alone is the highest good, the eternal substance, and that all else is transitory. One cannot grasp this without tapasya and the company of holy men. All right, so there are your two keys right there for developing your internal discernment, discrimination, so that you can see things accurately. Through tapasya, which is your spiritual practice, spending that time quieting the mind, stepping out of the stories that keep you deluded about the way the world works, staying in your sets of assumptions that have blinded you to the reality around you, and living with holy people who are going to be focusing on the truth and not also running out and continuing the blind run through pleasure and what do you call it, distraction in the world. And so hanging out with sober people, sober-minded people, not just from drinking, just sober in the sense of paying real attention to life and the way to live, and by doing your own spiritual practice. These are the two ways that are necessary for you to be able to eventually hear the internal guru. The problem with the internal guru, nobody wants an external guru. Everybody wants to do things themselves, which is fine and healthy if you are fine and healthy, right? But if you're not fine and healthy, then you probably ought to get someone else's opinion about what's going on in life. And so this tapasya and this holy company is what sets your compass, sets your internal compass, so that you get rid of the distractions and the old stories and the assumptions, and you begin to see things as they are. And suddenly, that which wasn't very apparent, but was obvious, becomes apparent to you. One cannot grasp this without tapasya and the company of holy men. What is the use of merely reciting the written parts for the drum? It is very difficult to put them into practice on the instrument. What can be accomplished by a mere lecture? It is austerity that is necessary. By that alone, one can comprehend. So you see the austerity. What is austerity? Anybody want to take a stab at the definition of austerity? Austerity is going against your own will. It's going to the gym for willpower. That's what austerity is. Taking a cold shower is austerity. You'll see those pictures, those famous pictures of sadhus that have kept their arms straight up for 40 years. They took a vow not to lower their arms before they realized God. And so now their arms don't come down anymore. They're stuck up like that. That's austerity. Not Vivekananda didn't really want that one and didn't want you to practice that one, but he respected it. He respected any form, any effort to know God. But austerity is doing things to sharpen your will, to sharpen your self-control. So you do things that you wouldn't normally do. Get up very early at a proper time every single day. Wear only one color all the time, or take a vow to drink only water for a month, or to fast. Fasting is a big one for that self-control, because you learn to control the mind, you learn to control the body. And that's the first lesson necessary for spiritual life, is learning how to concentrate and learning how to control yourself, how to have your no mean no and your yes mean yes. So we're trying to establish the scaffolding for integrity inside. So that's where he's going with this. What can be accomplished by listening to a mere lecture? Because also the other point is that the knowledge of God doesn't exist here. It's not a relative piece of knowledge that you learn and put in its box with its relational lines drawn to everything else in your mind. That's worldly knowledge. The knowledge of God is within you. It's part and parcel of you. It's not something separate that's stored in the mind. It's something you become deeply aware of, instantly aware of, when you begin to touch that inner shrine, that inner silence within. That which was obvious then becomes apparent to you. To quote Swami Tattvamayana, one of my favorite things. But the scriptures, he said, the scriptures are not there to tell you about God. They're there to tell you what God is not, so that that which is obvious can become apparent to you. All right. You ask about caste distinctions. There is only one way to remove them, and that is by the love of God. Lovers of God have no caste. Through this divine love, the untouchable becomes pure. The pariah no longer remains a pariah. Chaitanya embraced all, including the pariahs. The members of the Brahmo Samaj sing the name of Hari. That is very good. Through earnest prayer, one receives the grace of God and realizes him. God can be realized by means of all paths. The same God is invoked by different names. There's some really important things in there that he mentions there. This idea that the only way to get rid of caste is through love of God. This is so pertinent to us in this country for our dealing with race issues, because you can see how you try one thing and it goes wrong, another problem pops up. Anytime you're using race or using a physical attribute to make your distinctions or to fix a distinction, you're still basing it on that physical attribute, and there's going to be trouble behind that eventually. With this affirmative action thing, you see what happened with that. It's like, yes, it took care. It was a band-aid for fixing the problem of built-in system inequalities that didn't allow Black people to have, or any people of color to have ready access in the same way that many white people had. And so they came up with this artificial point system, to give rights or an extra boost to those people. But then what then happens after that? Well, then you don't respect a Black person's degree as much as you respect a white person's degree, because they got their degree through special treatment, or then you now have the white people feeling like they're being discriminated against because, it's harder for them to get into their chosen school than it was for their Black neighbor, So these kinds of troubles come up. The only way through this is that knowledge of the divine spark within. Until we recognize and define ourselves by our humanity, as our sole characteristic, until that time, there will not be equality for everyone. It cannot happen, because you just keep adding to the problem if you play with the same attributes to create different scenarios. The problem is making distinctions between one another based on things that are not us, based on bodies and based on minds. And so the way to help this world is not necessarily to run out and rally for all of these rights and responsibilities, although that can be helpful. So I'm not saying don't do it, but I'm saying that shouldn't be the primary. The primary is you working on your own self to know who you are. And that way, when you see others, that equality will be in you because you are honoring the divine spark in them. And that will assure your lack of discrimination, racial discrimination toward them. So this is a very important thing to understand, that our practice, because Vivekananda makes that statement that a sadhu realizing God on a mountaintop does more good to the world than 1,000 volunteers at the orphanages and hospitals down below. Why? Because one more person has been completely removed from the problem. In the other scenarios, things are helped, band-aids are placed, but people are suffering from the same problem continually. And you can see through all the years, how different is the world? How different is it? The problems just keep popping up. You slam them down in one place and they pop up in a new one, and round it goes. And so the solution to a better world, the way to make a better world, is for you to become a true person, to become a whole and integrated person through your practice, through your austerity, through your discipline, through your determination and awareness of what you are, that you're not a white person or an Indian person or a woman or a man or gay or straight or any of the gradations of gender. You are that divine spark, ever free and ever pure. Know that about yourself, and you'll see that in others. And that will take care of the problems that we face in our delusion of being bodies and minds.
Swamiji, don't we also, people, monks and holy people who have really achieved some amount of awareness or discernment also become influences and examples, so they can be an inspiration to other people?
Well, I think they are that by default, whether they choose to be that or not. Even those, yeah. Even those monks that run off into absolute cloistering, they're still, just the fact that the world knows they're there makes a difference, makes a change. Yeah. And people will see it in you. There's a genuineness around people who are truly doing their practice. There's a sweetness to them. And, that makes a difference during the day when you go and talk to a cashier as if they are your beloved. That changes their day. When you see their bad mood and you counter it with an absorbing good mood, that changes their day. It's these small things that make life beautiful. And people who are practicing holiness or practicing love of God tend to carry a lot of these little things with them and to distribute them even unknowingly throughout the day. And this doesn't mean to do it in imitation. This means to do it through earnestness and sincerity. Become the change you want to see in the world. Don't mimic the change you want to see in the world. Right?
And if it's attractive.
What's that?
It's attractive. We're drawn towards people who are also practicing and who are sincere and have a little bit more light shining through.
That's absolutely true. Yes, because we all recognize our inner divinity when we see it. Whether we're calling it that or not, we still see it, and we are drawn to it. We're attracted to it. Actually, everything that we're attracted to is a reflection of God. That's part of discernment. Discernment is taking a look at the thing that you're attracted to and freezing it in front of you and walking around it in your mind and looking at it from every angle until you find the name of God that's hidden in it somewhere. There's a quality of God hidden in that object of desire somewhere. And that's the key to discernment, is to find that name of God and let the object go. Realize that what you wanted was the divine reflection and not the object itself. And that's how you find your freedom from desire. That's how you combine all of your loves into a love of God, is by recognizing that that's the way it's always been. That's the way it is.
You are my mother. You are my father. You are
Indeed.
always with me. You are my friend.
That's
my
right.
my loving.
That's right.
Father.
Yeah, so that's what he says. So there's only one way to remove caste, and that is by the love of God. Lovers of God have caste. And pariahs remain no longer pariahs. And so he says, how's the way to do this? He says, through earnest prayer. Right? Through earnest prayer, one receives the grace of God and realizes him. God can be realized by means of all the paths. So wherever you are, it's through your earnest prayer. And of course, prayer is everything. Meditation is prayer, absorption is prayer, service is prayer. All the actions that you do in a day are prayer. Your whole life is a prayer. Every thought in your mind is a prayer. And, when Paul says in the Christian scriptures, pray without ceasing. We have our class on Vedic Christianity on Thursday night where we're studying the pilgrim who wandered the world to try and figure out what that sentence means. How does one pray without ceasing? And the answer to that from a different perspective than what he finds in the book is to realize that that's all you've ever done. That every move you make is a prayer for something. You're getting up and going to school is a prayer for your education. You're studying your chemistry class is your prayer for a good grade on the test. So everything that you do is a prayer to the divine. And so to develop your inner awareness so that you can see that you're always praying to the beloved, that you're always in that company. Then the same God is invoked by different names. Surendra's brother, the judge. Sir, what do you think of theosophy? Master, I've heard that man can acquire superhuman powers through it and perform miracles. I saw a man who brought a ghost under control. The ghost used to procure various things for his master. What shall I do with superhuman powers? Can one realize God through them? If God is not realized, then everything becomes false, right? Because God is the substance. God is the dreamer that sustains everything in the dream. And so you can go collect powers galore in the dream, but really you're only something as long as you're within the dream, as long as you're sleeping in the dream. When you awaken, what have you done? What have you accomplished? Nothing. And so theosophy, focuses on a lot of those siddhis, those spiritual gifts that come from practice. You can read about them in Raja Yoga. I think Vivekananda outlines them quite clearly there. But Ramakrishna says, do not pay attention to those things because all of them lead into little eddies on the side of the stream. Once you get stuck in one, you'll just spin around over there and it will take you a long time to get out. And so all of those spiritual gifts, if they come to you, which they do come to some people. I've met some swamis that have had them, but their attitude toward them is as if they didn't exist at all. They don't use them. They don't depend on them. They just ignore them. Sri Ramakrishna says that they're like signposts on the road that just tell you you're going the right direction. Don't use them. Don't get distracted by them. And for God's sake, don't let your ego get hold of them. So that's it. So that's what he thinks of theosophy. All right, November 1882. It was about 4:00 in the afternoon when Sri Ramakrishna arrived in Calcutta to attend the annual festival of the Brahmo Samaj, which was to be celebrated at Manilal Malik's house. Beside M and other devotees of the master, Vijay Goswami and a number of Brahmos were present. Elaborate arrangements had been made to make the occasion a success. Vijay was to conduct the worship. The Kathak recited the life of Prahlada from the Purana. Its substance was as follows. Hiranyakashipu, Prahlada's father, was king of the demons. He bore a great malice toward God. and put his own son through endless torture for leading a religious life. Afflicted by his father, Prahlada prayed to God, "Oh God, please give my father holy inclinations." At these words, the master wept. You know, the shortest scripture in the Bible is Jesus wept. So here we see the Thakur just hearing the spiritual truth and an earnest prayer from Prahlada for his father to get spirituality so he wouldn't suffer. And immediately he's moved to tears. "Oh God, please give my father holy inclinations." At these words, the master wept. He went into an ecstatic mood. Afterward, he began to talk to the devotees. Master, bhakti, devotion, is the only essential thing. One obtains love of God by constantly chanting his name and singing his glories. Ah, what a devotee Shivanath is. He is soaked in the love of God, like a cheesecake in syrup. One should not think my religion alone is the right path and other religions are false. God can be realized by means of all paths. It is enough to have sincere yearning for God. Infinite are the paths, and infinite are the opinions. Let me tell you one thing. God can be seen. The Vedas say that God is beyond mind and speech. The meaning of this is that God is unknown to the mind attached to worldly objects. Vaishnav Charan used to say, God is known by the mind and intellect that are pure. And what is pure? Pure means there's no sense of me or mine in there. That's the only necessary definition of purity. It's to lose that sense of me and mine for yourself. So when the mind and the intellect are devoid of the ideas of me and mine, God is clearly seen. God can be clearly seen. Therefore, it is necessary to seek the company of holy men, to practice prayer, and to listen to the instruction of the Guru. These purify the mind. Right? Those are the yamas and niyamas. These are the things that we do to clear out our mind, to stop the distortion of our thinking, to break out of this self-centeredness. You know, if you sit and consider, it's really heartbreaking to do because it's so chronic in us. If you sit and realize that almost everything you say and do in the day has you at the middle of the universe, it's all for yourself. Even the things that we call selfless are so often for ourselves. You know, the way that we take care of our families, or the ways that we do our jobs, or even when we give money to the homeless or whatnot. There's so often that impurity comes in, and we're really doing it for ourselves, to make ourselves, to back up the ego's idea that I'm a good person, to back up the egoistic perspective that I'm kind, that I'm loving, that I'm a good Christian, or I'm a good Hindu, or I'm a good Vedantist, or I'm a good Swami. You know, these are the reasons that we need to wake up, that we need to come to a realization of our nature and a purity of mind that allows us to have that objectivity. And see, the one special thing about what Vedanta is saying here is that by knowing that you're not the body and you're not the mind, that makes it much easier for you to accept the truth about your body and about your mind, because you don't have to take it personally, right? And that's a very, very, very important point. When you're sitting there in meditation and mother, you know, you're embarrassed because of the state of your mind. The embarrassment comes because of your identity with mind. It doesn't come because of the condition of mind. Everybody else's mind in the room is equally as bad, and you're not embarrassed about theirs. You're just embarrassed about yours because yours is yours, right? And so what you do is you put your mind, as it were, in the palm of your hand and hold it out in front of your mind's eye, as it were, and sit there with the Divine Mother or your divine ideal and talk to them about it. Look at this mind, Ma. Look at it. Look how noisy with just trash it is today. You know, and Ma will be like, yeah, I was noticing that. It's like, Ma, you know, I remember one time I was actually, I generally only tell you or request you to do things that I've tried and done myself that have worked. And there was one time when I was doing that, my mind was really had gone off into left field, which I won't talk about. And I was sitting there holding my mind, and I had placed Mom on my right shoulder, and I was discussing what was going through that mind. And about partway through it, I said to Ma, I said, you know, Ma, you would be in the same condition that I am if this was your mind. And Mother, you know, in my mind, Mother looked at me with such a knowing glance that I became aware of the simple truth that I had just stated, that in fact, Mother is me with my mind. There is no me in here. It is Mother alone here with this mind. And Mother with this mind looks like this before you, right? This is Mother with an impure mind, all right? And so when you sit there and can third party your mind or your body or your life or your actions or all the things going on for you, your addictions, all those things that normally the repair of them gets clouded by our self-image, by our attachment to being different, to the values that we've placed around them, to the guilt and shame that we carry around because of them, because of the way we're treated by others, because of our faults and failings. All of that stuff prevents us from healing. And the simple truth of it is it has nothing to do with you. These faults and failings belong to the mind and to the body. You are ever free. That's why the Bhagavad Gita tells you the self cannot be wedded, it cannot be burned, it cannot be cut. You know, it's telling you that you are absolutely free, that these things are not connected to you. And so when you look at the things that you're trying to purify, just by separating yourself from them is 98.5% of the task of purifying yourself. The rest of it comes as those things fall into line because of the attention, the gaze of attention, your eyes on them and the divine eyes of your chosen ideal sitting on your shoulder, looking at them. And so when you're doing your sadhana, you know, don't hesitate. If the mind's in a terrible space, put it in your hand, which means separate it from yourself. Look at it, which means you are not it because you're looking at it. And sit there with your chosen ideal, you know, instead of just uttering the name, realize the presence and have a conversation about the nature of mind, the nature of body, the nature of your practice, all the things that are your obstacles, and talk about them like that and have a laugh about them. You know, I can't tell you the number of really good, hearty laughs I've had in realizing the condition of my mind in the company of Mother, you know, over the years of practice. What used to make me weep in shame when I first joined the monastery now kind of makes me giggle in hilarity at the fact that I believe these things, that I believe that I'm this or I'm that, or that I'm only this or only that, you know. And this is how we find our freedom. This is how life becomes a great deal of fun, a really beautiful experience. So if God is not realized, everything becomes false, because everything is a dream that requires God to sustain it. November 1882. Oh, we've read that. One cannot, okay, here it is. Let me tell you one thing, God can be seen. The Vedas say that God is beyond mind and speech. The meaning of this is that God is unknown to the mind, attached to worldly objects. Vaishnav Charan used to say, God is known by the mind and intellect that are pure. Therefore, it is necessary to seek the company of holy men, to practice prayer, to listen to the instructions of the Guru. These purify the mind. Then one sees God. All right? right there is one sentence that we could shout from the mountaintops for a while. If you want to see God, if you want to know if he or she or that is real or not real, do these practices. Seek the company of holy men, practice prayer, and listen to the instructions of your guru. That's the threefold path right there, according to Sri Ramakrishna, for your realization. And if you can purify the mind, you will see God. You will see God. Dirt can be removed from water by a purifying agent. Then one sees one's reflection in it. One cannot see one's face in a mirror if the mirror is covered with dirt, right? The mirror in this case is the mind, right? This universe, well, this is a fun factoid here. The universe that you see is your reflection in mind. You're not a particular in the universe. This entire universe is your reflection. It's the reflection of consciousness in mind. And so the whole universe that you're looking at is really just the contents of mind, created by you through your senses. But once you purify the mind, once you still the mind, right? This is how the Upanishads talk about it. If you look at the lake of the mind, when it's rippled with the fingers of me and mine, you've got those two fingers in there rippling the lake, you see the reflection of the moon, but you can't tell it's the reflection of the moon. It's just a bunch of white shards ever changing in the ripples of the lake of the mind. But remove those fingers of me and mine from the lake and let that lake become placid and calm, let the mind become silent, absent of thought. And in that stillness, you will see the moon clearly reflected as the moon, which means in the stillness of your mind, you will realize who you are. You will see your reflection as a whole, an integrated being in mind. That's where your realization comes. So one cannot see one's face. You can't see your self. You don't know your true identity as long as the mind is impure, as long as it's muddy, as long as it's disturbed. Clear it out, purify it, and you will see yourself looking at yourself. You will understand your nature and become and take back that which you have forgotten. After the purification of the heart, one obtains divine love, right? Divine love is a love that has no cause. It's just drunkenness of love everywhere, always, just this divine reality. After the purification of the heart, one obtains divine love. Then one sees God through his grace, right? Because you were able to run that race by the grace of the divine. When you have to take that last piece of ego off of your back, as soon as you move it, ego disappears, and suddenly you can't take it off your back, because that which was taking it off your back disappears. It's gone. So that grace is always necessary, because that final piece of impurity has to be taken off by the divine itself, because you will not exist long enough to get it removed. So all that we can do, according to St. John of the Cross, he talks about, we can only get to the chasm. We can only get to the edge of the chasm. We cannot cross the chasm on our own through works or practice. That's an act of grace, because the divine has to come and remove that last piece of straw, that last impurity, for us to cross the chasm. And he says, so what do? You make your camp right there at the edge of the chasm, and you create a beautiful bridegroom's room where you're going to meet your beloved. And you spend your time beautifying that room, cleaning it, decorating it, painting it, fixing it up, so that the day that the beloved arrives, you have your space, for the consummation of that marriage once and for all, that unity. After the purification of the heart, one obtains divine love. Then one sees God through his grace. One can teach others if one receives that command from God after seeing him. Before that, one should not lecture, There is a song that says that you have, oh, that was a mistake. I can't see a thing. You have set up no image here within the shrine, O fool. Blowing the conch, you simply make confusion worse confounded, right? If you haven't done the work, the purification, what is there to be talked about? What is there to be said? The blind leading the blind, as Jesus says. You should first cleanse the shrine of your heart. Then you should install the deity and arrange worship. As yet, nothing has been done. What can you achieve by blowing the conch shell and simply making a loud noise? You know, life is about this. Life is about practice. You know, the only way that we can be spiritual people and not just religious people is to have a dedicated, earnest, and sincere practice that happens every day, multiple times a day, to help us to purify a mind. And why do we have to do it so much? Because we're doing everything else so much. If we hadn't been working on stirring our mind up for the last 58 years of our life, then we wouldn't have to spend so much effort, because it's obvious what we are to the pure soul, to the pure mind. They don't have to do any practice at all. You know, I remember reading in the, I think it wasn't the Vivekachudamani, I think it was the Vedantasara, and where it gives the listings, the qualities of a perfect student. You know, it says a perfect student has read all the Vedas and understood them. The perfect student has learned to control himself. The perfect student, you know, has purified the mind. Excuse me. All of these things. And I remember going to lunch with Swami Prabodhananda, and I was like, Maharaj, what is this? I said, I can't be a monk. This is talking about the requirements for just being a student, not even a monk, not even a brahmachari. I said, this is ridiculous. How can, you know, what's he talking about here? Nobody is a perfect student. And Swami said, he said something very beautiful, actually. He says, no, that is the description of an ideal, the description of a perfect student. He says, if you are the perfect student, then your teacher only has to come up and whisper in your ear a single time, thou art that. And you would immediately have your realization, because you had been the perfect student. You see, so he's saying, this is an easy thing to accomplish. It only takes a single command from the teacher, if you hadn't already made a mess. If you hadn't already spilled the ink wall all over the floor and knocked the chalkboard off the wall and tipped the desk over and sat backwards in the chair, you know, then being a student would be a lot easier for you, and the lesson would be much more quickly learned. And so this is the nature of it. We have to work as hard at undoing what we've done, because Holy Mother says, as you wrap the string on a spool of thread, in that same order it must be unwrapped, right? Now, of course, that's without grace. Without grace, we can just cut the knife and take all the string off at one time. So grace always has to be taken into consideration, lest we get too horribly discouraged, because it is a matter of grace. And you can have, like Mother says, this very moment, you can have your realization if you want it. See, that's the whole point. Because we haven't purified the mind, when we say, I want my realization, only like the top 3/8 of an inch of the mind are actually saying, I want realization. And all the other samskaras and things that are down outside of our conscious mind are sitting there saying, nah, I think I'll have more pizza instead, you know? And so we can't say it. So we're trying to get to the point where our yes is yes, which means that when we say yes with the top 3/8 of our mind, the entire self is engaged. Yes. You know, there's no struggle. If we say, I'm not going to do that thing, the whole body and mind is like, yes, we're not doing that thing. Perfect. You know, and we move as a whole. At this point, we move here with 3/8 of an inch this direction, and this 4/8 of an inch over here moves in that direction, and something down here tugs in that direction. And there's a big argument inside. We get into a bad mood. We feel disappointed. Oh my God, I hate myself. Oh, I'm never going to get there. I'm not going to church today. I don't want to talk to those people. I'm so sick of it. They're all hypocrites because I'm a hypocrite and I know I'm a hypocrite. Don't do it. Just purify your mind and be finished. All right, how are we doing here? 7:52, good. You should first cleanse the shrine of your heart. Then you should install the deity and arrange worship. As yet, nothing has been done. What can you achieve by blowing the conch shell and simply making a loud noise? Vijay sat on a raised stool and conducted the worship according to the rules of the Brahmo Samaj. Afterwards, he sat by the master to Vijay. Will you tell me one thing? Why did you harp so much on sin? By repeating 100 times, I am a sinner, one verily becomes a sinner. One should have the faith to be able to say, what? I have taken the name of God. How can I be a sinner? God is our Father and our Mother. Tell him, O Lord, I have committed sins, but I won't repeat them. Chant his name. Purify your body. Purify your mind. Purify your tongue by singing God's holy name. What he's telling you there is to identify with Adam before the fall, not after the fall. You know, Christian literature, he's criticizing Christian literature here, and he does it more directly in some places, because Christian literature is inundated with the idea of the nature of man being sinful, the nature of man being fallen. And if that is the height of your idea, then where will you rise to? Nowhere. You will remain such, and you will accept yourself as such, and you will continue to live as such, and you will have what we have in this world. But understand, you are not the fallen Adam. You are not Adam and Eve after the forbidden fruit was taken. You are the Adam and Eve before the fruit. You are in the same nature of the beloved as the divine. You are in harmony with the beloved in paradise. That is your inner nature, and that is to be returned to. And as long as you say, I'm a sinner, you identify with the fallen self, the body and the mind. You have to identify with the soul, which remains ever pure, the soul which has always been immortal, the soul which has always been full and made only of love and light and peace and harmony. That's who you identify with. That's where you get your clarion call to your nature. That's how you pray in faith to the beloved. That's where you stand. No more, I'm this or I'm that or I'm other. I am ever free, ever beloved of God. I am pure and immortal. I am one without a second. That is the truth of your nature. That's the truth of who you are. That's the celebration of spiritual life. All right. Anybody have any questions or concerns or things?
A question about chanting of the name of God.
Uh-huh.
What name are they referring to there?
Well, the name of God, whatever God you're serving. If it's Shiva, 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 you know, if it's Ramakrishna, if it's Jesus. But they're generally talking, he's making at least some allusion to the idea of the mantra. You know, most people who are doing a practice have a mantra that includes a name of God. And so you chant that mantra over and over and over again, each time trying to realize the form that it's presenting by the name. If you don't have a name of God, then I always turn to that beautiful poem by Rabia, where she complains that she's been praying her whole life and she's never seen God and everything is so dry. And she says, perhaps I've been calling him by the wrong name. And so she makes up a nickname for God. And she says at the end of the poem, and that has made all the difference. You know, so if you don't know God's name, make up one. You know, we do that for people that we love. My grandfather used to call my grandmother Chicken. Hey, Chicken. But sweetheart, darling, you know, Sweet Mittens, whatever, you know, come up with a nice name for God. I'll tell my story about Bill, my best friend Bill from long ago. He was studying Vedanta for the first time after I moved into the monastery. And he had gone to a lecture, and he didn't know who they were talking about. So he called me after the lecture, and he says, you know, I've been coming to this center for like a year now, and I thought I kind of knew everybody. But today the Swami went on and on about this guy named Tucker. He said, who's Tucker? I don't know who Tucker is.
Sorry.
And of course, he was referring to Thakur, you know, which is a nickname for Ramakrishna. And so, but he thought he was saying Tucker. And at that point forward, for quite a few years in the shrine, I would always chuckle and I would always address God as Tucker. I'd be like, hey, Tuck, how you doing today? And just have a laugh. But try that. Try taking a nickname for the beloved. Use it. Make sure it's earnest and sincere. You don't want it to be flippant and casual, disrespectful. But pick a name out of love for God and use that name if you don't have one. Or if you want to use one of an ideal that's in your heart, you know, use Jesus, use Buddha, use Ramakrishna, Krishna. Any name will be fine. They all indicate that one without a second. And so, and sing it. Sing the name of God. Sing the glories. That's just, you can either sing hymns, you know, there's some really great Christian hymns. You know, some of those old foot stompers are wonderful to sing during the day to yourself. You know, so sing those or make up one if you've got that kind of, no, even if you don't have that kind of ability. Torture God for a minute with your inability to sing, you know, with great love.
Thank you.
Yeah. But that's, you know, the important thing is just know what Ramakrishna told us tonight. God can be seen. He can be interacted with. She can be danced with. She can be played with. She can be talked to. She can be sung with. You know, she can be walked with in a very real and intimate way, more intimate than your own thoughts are to you. God is. And so take a great deal of joy in that. Yes. In any way that you can. Make up your own ways. You know, one of the cool things Vivekananda said, he says, as many people, so many paths. It's my highest ideal that every person would have their own religion. You know? So purify the heart and you can create your own religion through your own expression, your own love of the beloved, of the divine. Go forward. Yes. All right. Happy Independence Day. This is the day Vivekananda left the world, declared his independence. He even wrote a poem called The 4th of July in honor of our Independence Day here in this country. He loved that idea. And so take the true independence. Be independent from the body and the mind, from weakness and sorrow.
Thank you, Maharaj. So beautiful as usual. Thank you.
Yes. All right, my
Thank you,
friend.
Swami.
Be free, huh? Be free.
Thank you.
Jai Ma, Jai Thakur.
Jai Ma. Thank you.